He sat there in the empty room. Gray walls, cold concrete floor, no sound except his own breath. He couldn't remember the days or the months. Only one thing remained clear. There were no women here. No gentle eyes, no soft voice, no tender touch that could make the world feel alive. Only men, rough bodies, harsh voices, a tension that could erupt at any moment. Prison is not merely a place that confines the body. It is a space where the shadow rises to the surface, where the ego has nowhere left to hide, where the soul is laid bare like a tree stripped of its bark. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And perhaps within those cold and barren walls, fate finally reveals its true face. No women, no softness, only the shadow, the part of a man that most have suppressed all their lives. How many of us live our whole lives without ever seeing ourselves? Not the face in the mirror, but the monster lying silently within us. Anger, desire, the craving to be accepted, yet always denied, as if it were a flaw in the design of the soul. In a prison, when there is no one left to play the role of the woman, the lover, or even the mother, men are forced to confront the softness within themselves, the part they've rejected for so long. And when they cannot access that part in a healthy way, they convert it into violence, domination, and control. Have you ever wondered why, when a man loses the presence of a woman or the symbol of feminine energy, his world becomes cold, rigid, and fractured? Jung called this the anima, the feminine soul within a man. When the anima is suppressed, denied, or underdeveloped, a man becomes distorted, one-dimensional, like a child who has never been embraced. Prisoners are not only physically confined, they are amplified symbols of our society. Men living in the modern world, emotionally isolated, detached from real feeling, pushed to be hard, rational, and strong. But deep inside, they are screaming in silence. That is why shadow work is not a spiritual luxury for the few. It is a survival imperative. Because if we do not embrace our own shadow, it will find ways to control us from the depths, making us slaves to what we dare not face. Picture a man waking up every morning, going to work, coming home, watching TV, scrolling through his phone, then sleeping. He might have everything: money, status, friends, but he feels empty. Why? Because the deepest part of his soul has been forgotten. He has sacrificed his wholeness to fit an image society demands: successful, independent, emotionless. And then one day he breaks, like a prisoner with nothing left to lose. Not because he is weak, but because he was never taught how to be truly strong, to face pain, to accept vulnerability, and to heal from within. Freud once said that all behavior stems from the conflict between instinct and social norms. But Jung went further. He believed healing isn't about controlling instinct. It's about integrating it, befriending the shadow, understanding why anger appears, listening to the cries of the inner child, realizing that loneliness, that deep ache of rejection, may be the very gateway to awakening. And perhaps prison, the place without women, is a physical manifestation of a collective psychological phenomenon. A world where men are increasingly cut off from their inner aliveness. We live in an era where isolation has become the norm, not only within prison walls, but in luxurious apartments where each man returns home and finds himself alone, with memories no one knows, desires no one touches, and a soul no one calls by name. You may have never been to prison, but you might be living in another kind of cell, one where the shadow is locked away, where the anima is dying, and where a man is severed from the softest, most emotional, and most authentic parts of himself. There is a funny and terrifying truth. The modern man may master financial algorithms, but he doesn't know how to talk to his own emotions. He can read the market, but he cannot read his soul. And when the rage erupts, when the empty nights swallow each minute, he doesn't understand what's happening, because no one ever taught him about the shadow. No one ever told him, there is a part of you covered in dust, forgotten, but never gone, Carl Jung called it the shadow, the collection of all the parts we've rejected: anger, lust, weakness, fear, hurt, envy. Not because they are wrong, but because society deemed them unacceptable. We were taught that men don't cry, that we must be strong, never complain. And piece by piece, the most human parts of ourselves were pushed down, buried deep, becoming the shadow that now lives in our unconscious. But what is buried is not what disappears. The shadow is still there, and it shows up in uncontrollable outbursts of anger, in toxic relationships, in the dull ache of unnamed depression, in the hollow eyes of a man looking into the mirror and seeing no one. Jung never said we should destroy the shadow. On the contrary, he believed we must befriend it. We must look it in the eye and say, "I see you. I accept you as part of me." Only then does the shadow stop being a monster in the dark and become a guide toward true light. And here lies the most profound truth. The shadow is not just a container for our bad parts. It also holds our forgotten potential, the suppressed creativity, the gentleness we never allowed, the true courage found in facing ourselves. Inside every man lives a child who was never allowed to cry, a child who was taught that emotions are weakness, that love must be earned through pleasing others, that unless he is good enough, he is not worthy. Freud called it the childhood conflict, but Jung went further. He spoke of the inner child. That child isn't dead, it's just silent. But if we never listen to it, one day it will scream through self-destruction, depression, addiction, or that feeling of being completely lost even in the middle of a crowd. Let me tell you a story. A successful man with a family, a beautiful house, a luxury car. But every night he can't sleep. He stays awake for hours, scrolling on his phone, watching movies, drinking, anything to avoid hearing the quiet voice inside. One day his wife leaves. The kids stop talking to him. His career crumbles. He sits there for the first time with no one to play the role of the ideal man. And in that moment, he hears crying, not from anyone else, but from within himself, from the child he abandoned long ago. That man could be anyone. It could be you. It could be me. Beneath the shell of strength, logic, and decisiveness are layers of untouched emotion. And that is why shadow work isn't just an inner journey. It is a homecoming. Jung also spoke of the Anima, the feminine soul within every man. Not feminine in terms of gender, but as the energy of intuition, emotion, connection, creativity. In a hyper-masculine world, men are cut off from their anima, and as a result, they lose their ability to connect emotionally, not just with others, but with themselves. When a man no longer has access to his anima, he becomes hollow. He may be intelligent, but not sensitive, logical, but lacking compassion. He may love, but not know how to be loved. And so he becomes lonely, not because there's no one around, but because there's nowhere left to truly connect. The modern world, with its technology, social media, and obsession with productivity, has driven men further and further from their own souls. We evaluate a person by output, not by the depth of their presence. We are taught how to win, but not how to fail and heal. We learn to build personal brands, but not how to build a soulful life. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But to find that why, we must go through the dark night of the soul, a place where every path leads inward, a place where there's no one left to blame, nothing left to prove. Only one question remains: who am I when no one is watching? And the answer doesn't come from outside. It comes when you dare to open that dark door, step into the shadows and touch yourself. Not the version you perform for the world, but the one you've forgotten. If you've ever seen a man sitting alone in a park, eyes staring into something that doesn't exist, know this. Perhaps he isn't lonely because no one is beside him. Perhaps he is lonely because he has lost contact with his own soul. That is the silent tragedy of our time, a time where men no longer have space to be weak, no longer have the language to speak of their pain, no longer have the rights to become themselves. There are no women in prison, not because they don't commit crimes, but because the system is built on a different logic. But in the prison of men, where there are no women, there is no tenderness, no symbol of connection, no anima, the element that lets his soul bloom. We have locked men into a prison they themselves have built, the prison of achievement, of silence, of lifeless roles stretching over decades. And eventually they forget they ever had a dream. Carl Jung didn't hand us a map for escape. He merely left us a lantern and said, if you wish to find the light, dare to enter the darkness. You won't find yourself by running away. You won't heal by continuing to pretend. No app, no course, no relationship can replace the journey inward. And when you face your shadow, you'll see it's not as terrifying as you thought. It's just the part of you that was forced to be left behind, the part you rejected in order to be accepted. But it's still there, faithfully waiting for you to return. Inside the shadow is a child who was never held, a cry that no one ever heard, a primal self that was never allowed to live. Don't ask why you feel empty. Ask, how many parts of myself have I turned my back on? Don't ask why the world doesn't understand you. Ask, have I been honest with myself? Because liberation doesn't come from the outside. It comes when you dare to admit, I'm tired, I was wrong, I've abandoned myself for too long. And then perhaps, on a quiet evening, nothing special, while sitting alone with a cup of cold tea, you'll hear something faint, a voice inside you, gentle yet certain, whispering, I'm still here. I never left. That is your soul. That is you. Not the edited version, not the role society expects, but your raw, whole self, with shadow, with light, with tears, with longing, with love, with pain, with rage, with hope. An imperfect self, but a true one. You can begin again. Begin by sitting with yourself. No phone, no noise, no expectations. Write a letter to your shadow. Embrace the child within you. Let your anima return, whispering in a language beyond words. And if you're still listening to these final lines, perhaps you are ready. Not to become the perfect man, but to become a whole human being. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So next time you find yourself angry for no reason, sad without cause, or empty in the midst of success, pause, take a deep breath, and ask, what am I running from within myself? Because sometimes what you are running from is the very thing you need to return home. Listen, feel, face it, and remember, within the shadow lies a light you've never dared to look at. If this touched something in you, hold it like a seed in your heart. And when you're ready, plant it. You are not alone, and your soul is still waiting for you to come home.